Hello, everybody. This is Bart Sharp, and you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 103.5, broadcasting out of the beautiful city of New Orleans, Louisiana. However, we are much bigger than just the airways around beautiful New Orleans. We are on the UPRN website, Roku, cable television, YouTube, Facebook, Spreaker, and other internet platforms all around the world. And I am all around the world as I am still in lovely France. And it is so wonderful here with all the paranormal things. And it's so appropriate that it is United a UFO Paranormal Radio Network, because we've been seeing them out here. Um, just to relay a story of being at a Stargate Mountain, Peak de Bugarash, on the planetary alignments that happened a few weeks ago, and seeing a UFO every 2 minutes in the sky. Quite incredible, quite expansive. It's almost like when you see UFOs, or at least this is in my personal experience, and of course, when you are listening to the other people like Joe Montalto or Michelle Derricher, uh, they have a more direct knowledge. I am not a UFO guy like these guys are. However, it felt like they were right in my head and in my backyard, whatever you want to call it. And it's taken me days to kind of reacclimate myself to it. So here's to UFOs and ETs and crazy Stargate mountains like Peak de Bugarash, and how they all open us up in wonderful ways. So if you want to know more, just check out some of the other shows here on paranormal and UFO, and you'll get more information. And speaking of more information, we have a lovely guest today, Annie Williams, and I'm going to bring her on the show right now. Hi, Annie.
Hi, thanks for inviting me, Bart.
It's always a pleasure. Um, Annie and I have something in common in that we are lovers of France of magnitude, but yet we come from the United States, and we have to do this almost like an affair with a mysterious beauty of that we travel here and be here and then come back to the United States and fall in love with the United States. So we kind of have this thing going on. Uh, she's from Sedona. I'm from Austin, though. So um, I always see you as one of the people that has really embraced this land a lot longer than I have, a lot more experience, and in a variety of ways. You being a sound healer, um, a harp player, a musician, and also an author of this new book that I don't think I have ever really have another book to compare with it. Uh, it's you're going into new boundaries with this new book, Guardians of the Dragon Path, uh, which can bring the reader to go, "What the heck is that?" So that's probably my first question. It's like, why did you choose a title like Guardians of the Dragon Path?
Well, excellent, Bart. Yeah, I've been researching this area on both sides of the Pyrenees for about 18 years. That's when I first moved to the region. And I kept meeting these interesting guardian presences throughout history. Some of them have names like ancient goddess Artemis, Isis, Hygeia. They had temples in the region, actually, all the way into Spain, on the Mediterranean coast. And then I started actually meeting dragon presences that told me they were guardians of the certain mountains and valleys of the region. I had never met dragons before, so this was all new to me.
So this is an intuitive type of experience you're talking about.
Well, it's interesting. We were talking earlier, and you said you couldn't really put the book into any category. All of
Yeah.
these experiences that I wrote about, it's a combination of being guided by dreams over the last few decades to certain specific places that revealed mysteries and secrets about the region and the history. And a lot of them revealed information about Mary Magdalene, the Cathars, and the Grail. So it was an intuitive process, but also I was able to verify what I was finding every single time, except for the dragons didn't have verification. But everything I found, site-wise, information-wise, I was able to verify by various archaeologists from Spain and Catalonia and France. So I'm quoting historians in the book, et cetera. So it gives it a ground. And I think that's what makes the book interesting and unusual, because a lot of times you'll have either a channeled piece or a historical piece, but this really combines the two. And in that way, I think it's a bridge builder. And that was what I was hoping, that people that are skeptics, people that think all of this hullabaloo about Mary Magdalene in this area is hogwash or whatever, this gives it verification, which is, what I really wanted.
It is, and you're also forgetting to talk about your geological research and all the historical background in the mythology that you have, and personally, to find all the places that you mention in the book, and the neat thing about it is that you're kind of putting on your Indiana Jones hat and taking off and traveling to these places. It's not like you're reading it from a book, though
Right.
You are reading books. That's just so taking it to the streets, so to speak.
Right. It became an obsession, actually. And when I visited a site, I would go back sometimes 10 times to the same site. And each time something more would be revealed. So it was, on hands-on visits to the sites, and then a lot of reading historical books in various languages. So I had to back up what I was finding.
Yeah, and that's what makes it such a great book, is it's has such a variety of background and topics of you're substantiating what you felt intuitively or what you got in your dreams, or we don't, I don't even know what came first, and maybe that's not important, but it is this beautiful combination of all of these, which makes it unique. I do not know many authors that have such a rich background in what they write.
Well, I could name a few, and I quoted many of them. And that what attracts me, and just to back up what I was saying, what attracts me by particular authors like Robert Graves or some of the great mystics like Schwaller de Lubitsch, they were researchers into mythology, history, and yet they were mystics. And they had a visionary view of things, and they could describe the mythology that they were speaking about in multi-dimensions. So I think that is part of the attraction of some of the people that I'm quoting and some of the experiences, because they're multidimensional. They're not just, sites in stone, but they have connections with the stars, and the history tells a whole story that is magical.
It is. It certainly is. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with this, with it, because it's such a dense topic. But maybe the first thing to ask is, what is a dragon path exactly?
Yeah, I was hoping you would ask that because people are going to wonder what the heck. So I started out traveling with my harp and doing concerts and singing in various sites, not as a concert, but just as an offering. And a friend of mine noticed that I happened to be doing this up and down the Paris Meridian. And I started
Hmm.
looking at the sites along the Paris Meridian. And I realized that when the scientists from the Paris Observatory measured the Paris Meridian in the 1600s, they measured it from Dunkirk at the North Sea, in the northernmost point of France, right through Paris. So the observatory was the 0 point, right straight down through the area where we are sitting now, near Mount Bougarache, Rennes-le-Château, Rennes-les-Bains,
In the
and across.
unknown
And
mountain,
then,
in
pardon?
the unknown mountain, Peche Cardu.
Yes, absolutely. Cardu is just named basically, I believe, from the word Cardo, which means north-south meridian. So, there are clues in the place names that say that it was a more ancient meridian than just from the 1600s. And I was able to verify this by finding many, many sites, not only going back to the medieval era that are on the Paris meridian, but 6,000-year-old megalithic sites, menhirs, standing stones, dolmens, which are like stone houses. And the dragon name came in when Francois Arago completed the Paris meridian measurements. They measured the meridian by calibrating triangles on the earth, viewing from high points. It could be a church cathedral, a church tower or a cathedral tower, or a mountain. And they were calibrating with the brightest stars in the heavens. So this is how they measure. It's trigonometry, and they were able to actually establish the speed of light and sound in their measurements of the Paris meridian, which is extraordinary. So anyway, Francois Arago continued the Paris meridian across the Pyrenees all the way to Majorca, to an island called Isla Dragonera, the Isle of the Female Dragon. Now,
And
in Catalan language, huh?
if you do not know where that is, that would be just south of Perpignan, which is close to the Spanish-French border. Kind of right on the edge of the Pyrenees, and it goes straight south, probably 100 miles or something like that, was where the island
Yeah.
is located.
Well, it's an interesting thing because it's about. Well, I don't have the figure exactly in my head, but in looking at all of these sites, actually the Isla Dragonera is on the western side of Majorca. It's a tiny, tiny island, but it's part of Majorca. It's
Okay.
really pretty much due south of Barcelona. And when I was researching these sites, I realized that they formed a perfect cross across the Pyrenees. That's a whole other story. So if we use the...
We'll get to that.
Do you want to go there yet?
No. We're still on this. We haven't got to enough about the dragon lines. Yeah.
Okay.
So one thing about the dragon lines is that this is not the only one, but there are many.
Well, it depends on what you're speaking about when you say dragon lines. Dragon lines are the Chinese term lung mei in Chinese, for dragon lines, and they've been worked with for thousands and thousands of years. So they can be considered north-south meridians. They can be considered ley lines, alignments between major mountains. But in the way that I'm using it in this book, I'm calling the Paris Meridian and the sites that are lined up that kind of move like a serpent along the meridian, a dragon line in this time, in this book. Yes. But they can be many things. And the retired geologist Rory Duff, discovered what he calls emperor dragon lines that are the major ley lines that are moving across the earth, that are affected by not only telluric energies, but celestial energies. They're affected by the stars, and they have sound. So he's measured a lot of these, and he said most of these big dragon lines, emperor dragon lines, go through Spain. So I actually included that in the book because there are many lines going on, and I'm just talking about the one that lines up with the Paris Meridian.
Well, so how did Spain get so lucky, or is that luck?
Well, it's interesting. When the early traders were going back and forth across the Mediterranean, and a lot of this is verified in the history books, Herodotus, Strabo, etc. And they were trading for metals. They were trading for various items that, say, the Egyptians didn't have silver or they needed tin to make their alloys. The Greeks, the Phoenicians. So they were all traders, and they all had their ships. And the Egyptians were ordering, numerous dozens of ships from the Phoenicians because they were the master shipbuilders. But even before the Phoenicians were moving around, the Egyptians have references of traveling all the way out to the Atlantic, exploring various sites. So Iberia, or now Spain, had a lot of the silver, the tin, as well as the Cornwall coast with its tin trade.
Okay.
So that's, a lot of cultures were coming into Spain at an early time, thousands of years ago. And remnants of those visits have been documented by archaeologists, and they're in the museums in Spain, pottery, various busts of various gods and goddesses from the East.
Mm. And it almost sounds like this is older than a lot of the record in history, say before 5000 BC and dates before that. Would you suspect that?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely suspect it, but I can't prove it. So what I document in the book is up to about 2500 BC.
Okay.
And I try to follow with, what has been documented. But of course, everything is earlier than documented records, because the people were trading long ago. And of course, we have Plato's Atlantis. And I have a whole theory about that in the book as well. But yeah.
Yes, it's a juicy chapter. I have my own theories, and a lot of people of Iberia being a part of, or Iberia was a part of Atlantis, and which would say that Spain was most likely connected, and such. And it always brings up that question: is like, why were these dragon paths or these ley lines, placed in such specific designs? That would not seem like accidental.
Right. Well, and I believe that a lot of that goes back to earth energies, and where there are fissures from fault lines, where there are discontinuities of energy, where the electromagnetic energy is stronger For instance, in the Pyrenees and in this region, we have a lot of iron, which makes the red earth, just like we do in Sedona and Mount Shasta and other sacred sites. Teotihuacan has red earth. So a lot of these
Wow.
sites were established as sacred long ago because the people had a resonance, and I believe that iron in the earth resonates with the human blood. So there was an attraction, there was a magnetic attraction. And along with that, there's a lot of quartz. So we have the fault lines, we have iron, we have a lot of minerals, gold, silver, copper here in southern France and into the Pyrenees. So all of these elements have a resonance. And I think probably the biggest factor is the fault line formed by the Eurasian plate and the Iberian plate that pushed up the Pyrenees. And it's still moving. The Iberian plate is still moving very, very slowly into the Eurasian. So they're still pushing up. And this movement in the earth, as well as the fissures that are created by the volcanic regions near here, called the Garrocha, just north of Girona and in the southern Pyrenees, that also creates a great magnetism. And actually, one of my favorite, well, there are many favorites, but one of the Magdalene sites in the book that is featured is on the top of one of these old volcanoes, an extinct volcano. And it creates an energy, and you can feel it, it's palpable.
Wow. It is. And does that site have a particular name?
Yes, it does. Santa Magdalena de Montpalau, or Mountain Palace. The hill is called Montaña Magdalena, and the old castle was a Knight Templar castle. It's called Castel Magdalena. And actually, an astrophysicist helped me find that this site of Magdalena sits in the center of a perfect six-pointed star pattern. And he was able to measure it exactly. And the sites surrounding the Magdalena Mountain with the Magdalena Chapel on this old volcano are Knights Templar sites marking the points of the hexagram, which is like, you know, the seal of Solomon, the Star of David. So you have this.
So you're talking about 6 Templar sites around this mountain peak. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
Actually, 4 of them are right on the points, exactly, which is a really extraordinary number. And that star pattern is not the only interesting site there. It happens to be along what I found was a east-west line meridian that I call the Magdalena Path. So there's the Paris Meridian running north-south, which I call the Dragon Line, which I discovered that there are many Magdalena sites exactly on that meridian, going all the way across the Pyrenees and down to Mallorca.
Yeah.
So we have, yeah.
Why would they call it a Magdalena title?
Well, they didn't.
Yes, we all revere Mary Magdalene, but it sounds like it might be something more than just that. I mean, why wouldn't they call it Isis or Mother Mary? Or
I mean, to answer your question, Bart, they didn't call it a Magdalena Meridian.
Okay.
I just noticed that there were a lot of Magdalena sites right on the Paris Meridian, more than was kind of coincidence. And so that was the term that I use. It wasn't called that. Although on the east-west line that I call the Magdalena Path, which overlays the old Camino de Santiago de Compostela, there is a stretch of that road that is called Calle Magdalena. So there is some referencing that it was acknowledged long ago. And on the Paris Meridian, there's a place called Port de Madeleine, right on the Meridian, just north of Mount Canigou. So, the place names somewhat, but more the placement of locations of her chapels were the clues for me.
They certainly are, just like the Templars being in a six-sided design around the volcano top. And just like around Rennes Chateau, we have what I see is 3 Templar sites, de Bézieux, Campas-sur-Aude, and oh gosh, I can't think of the last one, Blanchefort.
Blanchefort is one of the points
Yes.
of Henry Lincoln's pentagram. He also found a hexagram in the landscape as well. So the Templars were at Blanchefort, certainly. And they were actually another point of the pentagram is Rennes-le-Château. And they were there and still are, actually, at Rennes-le-Château. And then Bézieux, of course. Yeah.
Yes. And Campas-sur-Aude. That's a Templar site
that
for
was
a church.
It's not on the pentagram, but it's an important Templar.
Yeah. The point I was making is those 3 seem to be a triangle with Rennes-le-Château in the middle. If you look at it that way.
Yeah.
Another one. I mean, there's designs upon designs. So this is a personally curious question because of my own fascination with the Templars, and since you know so much, what do you think the Templars were trying to get when they built 6 sites around this amazing site? With there,
I can guess, knowing that they were very much into geometry. They spent a lot of time at the Temple Mount and doing research. They were very aware of Islamic geometry. The Arabs have always been into exquisite geometry. And at a lot of the Templar sites, no matter what country you're in, you'll see a lot of geometric forms. So they were, the story that geometry tells is part of it. There's secrets like the flower of life. They acknowledged the symbology of these forms and their cosmic representations, what they meant in the scheme of things, the design of the universe, the perfection and the harmony of the design in nature. It's also in these forms, flower petals, 5-pointed and 6-pointed, etc. So we find all of these shapes in nature, and I think, they would have been attractive to anyone that was involved in the mysteries, as the Templars were.
Yes. The almost like an architectural spirituality and maybe that those places would resonate in energy that would not be forgotten through time. That they
really
would be
good
there for
point. Yeah.
For people like us, just like when we go to a chateau and we tune into just being in the building itself. It seems to have something grow inside of you. And of course, we're both testaments to many of these places that do such things.
Well, thank you for bringing...
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say thank you for bringing that up, Bart. It's a very, very important part of this. What do these sites resonate within us? What do these sites precipitate in states of consciousness, in altered states of feeling? And if you're in a site that has part of a landscape geometry the sites are speaking or singing to each other. The mountaintops are resonating, and there's a harmonious field. What was the term that my friend called it? A radiant zone, creating a feeling of radiance or well-being. And a lot of that is also in the stone structures, not only of chapels of the Templars and Magdalena, the great cathedrals, but also the old stone monuments like the standing stones. And they're speaking to one another. I've been getting more and more aware of this principle of the harmony that they create in the landscape. It's like a symphony or a chorus of frequencies, because
So when you say standing stones, you mean a menhir, which is a stone that's been planted in a specific place, almost like for a specific task.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I found those marking the cross that I discovered. So with the Paris Meridian as the north-south axis, and the ancient Way of the Stars and the later Camino de Santiago running east-west, I discovered that there was a cross pattern that was formed by not just one menhir or dolmen, but groups, megalithic routes where they have dozens in one area, marking a particular region for ceremonies, for alignments to the stars, to the solstices, etc. And I found that these multiple megaliths were marking each of the four arms of an equal arm cross that stretches across the Pyrenees. So, those sites are creating a big energy. And when we visit them.
Now you're talking about, I can't remember which page in your book, but it's that big cross, and it's a Magdalene Paris cross. And you call it the Way of the Stars in the book. Is that are we on the same page with that?
Basically, there are two things. The Way of the Stars is an ancient east-west pilgrimage path going from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic or the Bay of Biscay, just past Santiago. A place called Finisterre, the end of the world. So that's the east-west line. And the north-south, and that's the greater east-west initiatic path that has been for the last 6,000 years right on the southern slopes of the Pyrenees. Later on, it became the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. And there are many routes of the Santiago pilgrimage. Many come from France. Some of them just go along the northwest area of Spain, but the older route left from the Mediterranean. So anyway, that's the part that's marked with the megaliths, this equal arm cross, Catalonia and France.
And my guess is there's lots of iron deposits that would resonate with the blood within the person as they walk the path, and thus
there's iron in the region.
Magical experiences.
Absolutely, yeah. And in the whole Pyrenees region, they were mining iron long ago. So I think that's really what it's about. It's not so much about the composition as what it creates in us and how it opens us up. And for me, that opening was always including music. So I would hear songs at the sites and then sing or play my harp back to the site. And magical things would happen.
Yeah, and you mentioned something in the book about the 7 tones. Is that what you're talking about?
Not exactly. Those were the 7 creation dragons, according to the Tibetans. But I mean, of course, I use those tones in the music when I'm connecting with a site. Yeah, can we go to the center of the cross? I just feel like
Yeah,
there's a gem waiting there.
please go. Please move forward.
Thank you. So, this great cross that is marked by megalithic sites running north, south, and east, west. I wondered and wondered what could be at the center. And this was part of the quest over the decades. And I had a dream, and the dream ultimately guided me to a museum that guided me to another museum monastery that had an ancient Egyptian stela that told a story about this Egyptian ritual. And I found the ritual portrayed into a piece of art in a museum on the Dragon Path at a place called Vic, Spain. And when I saw the image, it was the image of the Egyptian ritual of opening the mouth, which was performed on the pharaohs so that they could travel to the stars. And it was literally this ritual would open their mouth so they could speak the sacred words, open their eyes so they could see in their navigation, and open their ears so they could hear the instructions as they're navigating to these various stars on their way home. So this ritual, this Egyptian ritual, is illustrated in a painting about Mary Magdalene on her deathbed with Jesus, Yeshua, performing the ritual of receiving this, her opening of her mouth, and her spirit is exiting into his hands, and he's guiding her home to him.
Wow, the great navigator.
Yeah, and it's extraordinary. When I saw the painting in the museum, it was jaw-dropping. You know, I thought, where the heck is this place? Because the painting said it was from Santa Magdalena de Pareja. Where the heck is Santa Magdalena de Pareja? Never heard of it. Nobody I had talked to ever heard of it, right?
Put on your Indiana
so
Jones
I asked
hat.
Right. So I asked the curator at the museum, and she pointed, I had a map with me of the area, and she pointed to where it was. And lo and behold, it was the site that I had been searching for that's marking the center of the equal arm cross, landscape cross. All that I could find on Google Earth was a farmhouse. It didn't say, you know, a chapel to Magdalena. It said Pareja. So I,
Could you spell
of course,
that,
had to
by
visit
the way?
the site. And yes, Perella. Okay. Pareja. And the name is interesting because perla, which is close, means pearl.
Yes.
And pareja means pair in Spanish. So the couple, the sacred couple.
Stop right there. Let's stop right there. We're starting to get at a really high vibration. And to tell the audience, Annie and I have tried to do this interview twice. And each time it seems like we get to this epiphany of awareness, and the energy gets so high, the internet connection fizzles, and we lose the recording. So hang on to that thought. Let's calm it down energetically. This is the first in radio that I know of that you're telling the system to calm down and our bodies to calm down because we don't want to split this. And so while you calm down and put your thoughts together, I'm going to tell everybody that you are listening to Annie Williams, author of Guardians of the Dragon Path. And you can find Annie on anniewilliams.com, and that's ANIWILLIAMS. And I am Bart Sharp, and this is Becoming Quantum Conscious, and you are on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 103.5, broadcasting out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Also seen on Roku, that's cable television, if you're like me that never keep up with that type of stuff. But also Facebook, YouTube, and the UPRN website, broadcasting all over the world, all over the place. And we have Annie Williams in this epiphany of this wonderful story. And I'm going to let her take off again. Are you calm yet, Annie? Are you calm? We got the angels with us. We're not going to blow the circuitry of this recording. Off we go.
All right. So the site called Santa Magdalena de Pereira. Of course, I had to visit it. And it's a tiny, tiny little chapel in the Pyrenees on the Catalan side. And as I approached the chapel, a rainbow appeared over the bridge I was crossing. And it just felt like everything was divinely perfect. And there were white roses blooming on her hillside. And at the bottom of the hill was a sign that said, "Cuidado, abellas." Be careful, there are bees here. And so I just hill. Now I should back up and say that most of the Magdalena chapels are on hilltops.
Wow.
She who holds the high place, Magdala, meaning tower. They were watchtowers actually all across the Mediterranean into the eastern Levant. There were watchtowers for 6,000 years. And the names were Magdala, Magdalena.
So that's how that symbology all came about, is the tower meaning Mary Magdalene.
Right.
Wow. She holds the
highest.
Yes,
she's at the high place. Yeah. And so, and her hill being surrounded by bees was very significant, because bees have always been associated in the mother goddess traditions with priestesses of sight, oracular prophecy. And, Magdalene was the first to see Jesus in his body of light. She was a seer. So there was all of this symbology with the bees the whole time I was researching her in the Pyrenees. And the bees also always related to royal bloodlines in the Egyptian traditions. Honey was placed in the tombs of the pharaoh to stimulate his fertility in his next life, to continue the bloodline, the royal bloodline. So the bees have many associations, prophecy, and lineage and fertility. So then, as I entered the church, I discovered some really interesting symbology. Not only was a copy of the original art piece of her on her deathbed with the opening of the mouth ritual, but 5 other scenes in her life with Yeshua. And above the art, above the altar, was a bridal tent painted as a fresco on the wall of the little chapel. So she was the bride of Pereira, the queen bee of Pereira. And there were more symbolisms of, well, so I should say that the bridal chamber in the traditional huppah in the Hebrew was the bridal chamber where she would come out and in the wedding ceremony from her bridal chamber. So there it was, right in the chapel, as clear as day. And then all over the floor, there were large X's carved into the floor tiles. And I'd never seen that in another church. And they weren't part of a modern tile pattern. They were hand inscribed X's carved. This is a symbol of union, partnership, the male and female with the V, the cup of the feminine, and the yang sword, the upward, so forming the X. It was also a symbol of the underground stream during the medieval era, and those who were like Cathars, Templars, those who adored Mary Magdalene, the Hermetic traditions that were carried on. The X was symbolic of this underground. So anyway, that's some of the symbology at the center of this great cross. So she was like the omphalos, the center point, the heart of this landscape cross.
Wow. That's an amazing story. And this is just one of many chapters out of the Guardians of the Dragon Path that are pretty spellbinding in general. You know, but this is right in the center of that cross, which is right in the middle of the Pyrenees. One side going to Spain, one side in France, going up to northern France, of course. This is right in the middle, folks. You know, so if you dare to put on that Indiana Jones hat and take this search, you probably need to buy this book and get on it. Because, well, so many of us have joined in this journey of going to France and finding these things. And it's always amazing to me that it's so generational, you know, and people see it from a variety of perspectives. Some are kind of in a new age psychic thing, some are historical, and then all in between. But this is a wonderful book to bridge that and open that journey. And it really makes me want to start, of course, finding this site, but also the sites on the northern route that are the Magdalena sites, all on hills. It's a new adventure that I have not even fathomed. So this is totally amazing. I had one question with this, with the cross in this book. There was always a dolmen at the end of this 4 crosses. And any idea of why they would use a dolmen there?
Yeah, it's a good question. Why is the $64,000 question? The sites that they built these groupings of megaliths were often on ancient trackways that had been used for thousands of years. There were migration paths, transhumance paths with, you know, that were used for moving livestock during the seasons from the mountains to the coastal areas. And there were also places near major rivers. So there was always a water source. So it made sense to put your sites in these particular places. But why marking a cross? That still remains to be discovered. I believe that the north-south megaliths that I discovered on the Paris Meridian Dragon Path were marking near, again, rare waterways like the Salt River in the Rennes-les-Bains area, the Mount Cardew and Mount Bougarache that were marking along that part of the meridian. There were major mountains and waterways that would have attracted ancient people from forever. Also, the minerals in the earth, as we spoke of earlier. And I wanted to say one thing about what you were mentioning, Bart, a second ago, about not knowing a lot of the Magdalene sites on the other side of the Pyrenees. Most people don't talk about them. They focus on the French
No.
side. And that has it's been written about much more. It's been talked about. It's been explored in pilgrimages by various groups. I feel like I opened the door to some of these sites that were not known by myself or very many others. And I have just a little thing to say about Pareja and some of these obscure sites. They're very difficult to get to. Most of them are locked. So, and they're on private land. So you have to contact the family that owns the land to get permission to go. And then if they will let you have the key to open up the chapel. But anyway, the point is to experience the energy of these sites. You can just go and sit and meditate at the base of the hill or even against the stone of the chapel. And
So true.
you can project yourself inside if you want to, or at the stones, and just feel the energies. And each person will get a different message, a different sign, a different teaching.
And if you are an intuitive and you like to read these mystical books, what I have found is that whenever you see something that just resonates in your body, like, wow, this is a major truth, like the part where you're talking about opening of the mouth and this great navigational consciousness comes out, you can start to look at that as a psychic or an intuitive to go, how can that apply to my life, that I can have an internal navigational tool that connects to something of the cosmos, something like that. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what came up for me as I got it, because as I look at this book, it's one that you really need to read a couple of times. I don't even know how you wrote it. It's so rich and complex. I can imagine all the headaches and challenges you face with it in writing such a book. But we're coming to the end of the show. And Annie, go ahead.
Well, I just want to comment about navigating because you posed the question, and I just have to respond that
Okay.
the things that help us with our own navigation are forms of regular meditation, using the voice and using mantras in whatever language we do them in, doing things that open our senses and our awareness and our consciousness while we're living. Because for the Egyptians, the preparation for the afterlife was more important in their living existence than actually having a good life and enjoying this and that. Preparing for the afterlife was the major thing. So, opening our consciousness is the key to that.
Indeed. And there's so many ways. I'm going to leave you with asking one more question, and I want you to think about it while I do my closing. And just, we got about 2 minutes to finish the show. So, what message would you give to the readers or the listeners today as a final message? Think of that, and I will say that you're listening to Annie Williams, author of Guardians of the Dragon Path, and you can find her on anniewilliams.com. And I am Bart Sharp, and this is Becoming Quantum Conscious, and you are on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 107.7 and 103.5 out of New Orleans, Louisiana, heard on Roku, Facebook, X, and the UPRN website. So what imparting wisdom do you have for everybody, Annie?
I would say trust your dreams, follow your dreams, follow your, sometimes I say follow your bones in the way that, just follow your intuition. Each one of us has a beautiful, unique path. And it's not for all of us to go running around the Pyrenees. Some of us have other jobs to do. So just follow that light in your heart and use your voice to sing to nature, to sing to children, sing to the trees, because that is what our planet really needs. It needs beauty, harmony, and for
Amen.
ourselves.
Amen. Thank you so much, Annie. Many blessings to you. And thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing Guardians of the Dragon Path with us. We'll see everybody next week. Bye-bye.